Kuhn Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @KuhnReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@kuhnreview.com. That is INFORMATION @CuandReview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
From The National, Friday the 9th of May 2025, from the news section. Energy suppliers pay out £7 million after overcharging 34,000 customers. Article written by Gregor Young. 10 energy suppliers have paid out around £7 million in compensation and refunds after an error led to some customers being overcharged, the energy watchdog has said. Industry regulator Ofgem said the compensation and refunds will have been paid out to more than 34,000 customers. It said this included more than 20,000 customers at the UK's largest suppliers, Octopus Energy, which paid out £2.64 million in refunds and made a £546,278 goodwill payment. The error also impacted customers at Utility Warehouse, OVO Energy, So Energy, Outfox the Market, Otricity, E.ON Next, True Energy, Rebel Energy and EDF Energy. Utility Warehouse paid out more than £2 million in refunds after 8,272 of its customers were overcharged. Ofgem said the issue, which took place between January 2019 and September 2024, affected customers with more than one electricity meter point at their properties recording energy usage. Suppliers can apply multiple standing charges for homes with multiple meters, but Ofgem said this resulted in some customers being erroneously charged more than is allowed under the price cap. The latest Ofgem price cap would see an average household with an annual energy bill of £1,738. Charlotte Friel, Director of Retail Pricing and Systems at Ofgem, said, "We expect all suppliers to have robust processes in place so they can bill their customers accurately. While it's clear that on this occasion errors were made, thankfully the issues were promptly resolved and customers are being refunded. Today's outcome serves as a reminder to all energy suppliers that they must implement the price cap properly and do their due diligence. It also shows that, where appropriate, Ofgem is prepared to work with suppliers that fail to comply with our rules." The regulator said all 10 suppliers have since updated their systems and processes to stop the issue recurring. That article was written by Gregor Young and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 9th of May 2025, from the news section. 2 former friends found guilty of cutting down Sycamore Gap tree. Article written by Gregor Young. 2 former friends have been found guilty of cutting down the world-famous Sycamore Gap tree in an act of deliberate and mindless criminal damage. Daniel Graham and Adam Carruthers drove through a storm for 30 miles in the middle of the night from their homes in Cumbria to the Northumberland landmark, where one of them cut down the sycamore with a chainsaw and the other filmed it. Newcastle Crown Court heard the pair then kept a wedge of the trunk as a trophy and spent the next day revelling in news reports about their moronic mission. Prosecutors said the odd couple, who did everything together, had thought it would be a bit of a laugh, but realised they weren't the big men they thought they were when they saw the public outrage they had caused by committing the arboreal equivalent of mindless thuggery. On Friday, groundworker Graham, 39, and mechanic Carruthers, 32, were each found guilty of 2 counts of criminal damage, one to the much-photographed tree and one to Hadrian's Wall, which was damaged when the sycamore fell on it. There was no visible reaction from either in the dock as the journey returned after just over 5 hours to convict them of causing £622,191 of criminal damage to the tree and £1,144 of damage to the wall. The trial heard the totemic sycamore had stood for more than 100 years in a dramatic dip in Hadrian's Wall, becoming a popular spot for everything from picnics to proposals, and achieving worldwide fame when it was featured in the 1991 Kevin Costner film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Opening the case to jurors, prosecutor Richard Wright Casey said, "Though the tree had grown for over 100 years, the act of irreparably damaging it was the work of a matter of minutes." Jurors heard Graham and Carruthers were best of pals at the time and regularly worked together felling trees. The court heard Graham's Land Rover was picked up on automatic number plate recognition cameras between Carlisle and Sycamore Gap at night on September the 27th, 2023, and returning early the next morning. His phone was traced to cell sites making the same journey. When police arrested the pair and searched Graham's phone, they found a 2-minute and 41-second video which showed the sycamore being cut down at 12:30 a.m. on September 28th and had been sent to Carruthers. They also found photos and videos of a wedge of tree trunk and a chainsaw in the boot of Graham's Range Rover, although these have never been found. Messages and voice notes between Graham and Carruthers the next day showed them talking about the story going wild and viral, referring to an operation like we did last night, and joking that the damage looked like it had been done by a professional. But, Wright said, by the time their trial started 18 months later, the pair had lost their courage and their once close friendship had collapsed, with each apparently blaming the other. Graham accused Carruthers of taking his Range Rover and mobile phone to Sycamore Gap that night without his knowledge, saying he had now turned on his former friend because his business was being affected by Carruthers' actions. Graham claims during his evidence that Carruthers had a fascination with the sycamore, saying he had described it as the most famous tree in the world, and spoken of wanting to cut it down, even keeping a piece of string in his workshop that he had used to measure the circumference. Carruthers denied this and told the court he could not understand the outcry over the story, saying it was just a tree. Cross-examining Carruthers, Wright asked him, "Is that what's at the heart of this? You thought it was just a tree, and when the rest of the world didn't think it was just a tree, and it was a terrible and wicked thing to have done, you've lost your bottle and can't own up to it." They will be sentenced on July 15th. That article was written by Gregor Young and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 9th of May, 2025, from the news section. New Pope hates J.D. Vance and shared criticism of US Vice President. Article written by Hamish Morrison. The new Pope has posted critical tweets about US Vice President J.D. Vance. Pope Leo XIV, the first pontiff from North America, held a Twitter X account under his real name, Robert Prevost, which he used to criticize Donald Trump's deputy. The new Pope did not tweet in 2024, but returned to the platform in 2025 to share an article about Vance's claim that Christian teaching demanded a hierarchy of love. Shortly before his death, Pope Francis wrote to US bishops criticizing Trump's plans for mass deportations of immigrants, saying they were an offense to people's inherent dignity. In a Fox News interview in January, the vice president claimed, "There is a Christian concept that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens, and then after that, prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that." His argument sparked a fierce theological debate on the Catholic Church's position on immigration, with some pointing to St. Thomas Aquinas' concept of ordo amoris, which places one's immediate family at the top of a hierarchy of love which spreads downwards, in defence of Vance. But an article published in the National Catholic Reporter, shared by Pope Leo before his election, said the concept of a hierarchy feeds the myth that some people are more deserving of our care than others. Author Kat Almas wrote, "The love Jesus speaks of is not about calculation or a choice between our families or neighbours. It is not a finite resource to ration out, but a river that flows wild and without restraint." The Pope, who was born in Chicago and served as Cardinal Bishop of Albano before his election, shared another article 10 days after the first from America, a Jesuit magazine, which said that Catholics cannot support a rhetoric that demonizes immigrants as dangerously criminal simply because they have crossed the border in search of a better life for themselves and their families. The article added, "It ought to be clear that Catholics cannot celebrate aggressive deportation enforcement as a spectacle. It ought to be clear that Catholics cannot accept a theory of love that pats itself on the back for putting some of the poorest among us furthest from our concern and charity." His other tweets from this year are two praying for the health of Pope Francis before his death on April 21st, and a retweet of Catholic writer Rocco Palmo criticizing Trump and Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele for laughing at the illicit deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. In April, the Supreme Court ordered Trump to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return from a notorious prison in El Salvador after he was accused of being a gang member, with the White House blaming an administrative error for his deportation. Pope Leo XIV's name has been interpreted as a political statement, as the last pope of that name wrote a foundational document of Catholic social teaching, Rerum Novarum, which argued for the rights of working people and trade unions and against unfettered capitalism. Twitter, ex-users, seized on the Pope's social media activity as evidence he hates Vance. One account said, "The new Pope appears to not have tweeted in 2024, returning only to pray for Pope Francis's health and criticize J.D. Vance." Another added, "Excellent job of maintaining continuity by picking another Pope who personally hates J.D. Vance." That article was written by Hamish Morrison and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 9th of May, 2025, from the Politics section. Richard Tice left fuming on BBC Question Time by trade union boss. Article written by Alistair Ferguson. Richard Tice and Reform UK have been accused of being fraudulent with their promises and offering working class people nothing instead, a trade union leader has warned. Speaking on BBC's Question Time on Thursday evening, Joe Grady, General Secretary of the University and College Union, said it is a blunt truth that not a single political party in the UK are offering solutions to the issues the UK faces. She went on to say that Nigel Farage's party had been using working class people's discontent with the UK government for their own political gain while offering nothing in return. Grady tore into Reform in a 2-minute-long clip about how the party are not the answer to working class people's problems following the party's surge in last week's local elections in England. She said, "I want to be really, really clear, because I don't think Richard Tice and I don't think Nigel Farage or Reform are the answer. Reform, we've just heard it, are offering nothing for working people. They're offering nothing on what is a rigged economy. They're offering nothing on how we're going to tackle privatisation. In fact, what you were just saying is, we'll negotiate better contracts. Nothing on the NHS." Tice attempted to interrupt, but was quickly slapped down by presenter Fiona Bruce, who encouraged Grady to continue. Grady said, "Nothing on a crumbling infrastructure of transport, nothing on wages and the crippling cost of living, nothing on a housing crisis. All Reform stands for is a status quo politically, but with an added dose of finger-pointing." Bruce then interjected, asking Grady why she thinks people voted for Reform, to which the trade union leader replied, "I'm getting on to that." Grady added, "I think that there's a real issue because it wasn't immigrants that were cutting council funding in Hull, it was politicians. It wasn't immigrants who were slashing school budgets in Hull, it was politicians, and Reform would have been doing those things too." She added, "I think you're being fraudulent. I think you're offering people the suggestion that you're going to change things, but when you've just been asked how you're going to change things, all you gave was a coded, 'We're going to privatise more.' And this is the truth that working class communities need to hear." A visibly irritated Tice attempted to once again interrupt Grady, but was told by Bruce to let the senior lecturer in employment relations finish. Grady concluded by saying, "We have to come together. We have to join trade unions. We have to tell the political class, whether they're Reform, whether they're Labour, whether they're anyone else, because Nigel Farage and you, Tice, are members of that political class, that we aren't having it anymore." Grady's warning comes after a recent poll showed Reform are set to sweep England at the next general election. The party is predicted to make ground in Scotland too, with a recent survey suggesting the party could become the main opposition to the SNP in Scotland after next year's Holyrood election. That article was written by Alistair Ferguson and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 9th of May 2025, from the Politics section. Scotland's best future is as an independent country in EU. Article written by Gregor Young. The best future for Scotland will be as an independent country inside the European Union, the External Affairs Secretary has said. Angus Robertson issued the statement as the Scottish Government marked Europe Day. The annual event celebrates peace and unity on the continent. He warned that the UK risked being marooned outside the economic bloc as he hailed Scotland's long-standing shared values with Europe. He said, "On Europe Day, we celebrate a lifetime of peace in Europe, achieved in no part by the creation of the European Union. With war having again returned to our continent, now is the time to stand together and heal the divisions of the past. We are unwavering in our belief that Scotland's best future lies as an independent country within the European Union. The current global economic volatility simply reinforces the importance of Scotland having the security, stability and opportunity that comes with EU membership. Without it, Scotland and the UK risk being marooned outside of the world's largest single market." Robertson said, becoming a member of the EU again would reduce barriers to trade, bring free flows of data and reduce bureaucracy. He added, "We would have access to a larger labour market with no restrictions on employing EU citizens to work in Scotland, sustaining businesses, universities, communities and public services. In the short term, the UK government must negotiate the most ambitious deal possible with the EU at the upcoming summit meeting, including a comprehensive agreement to boost food and drink exports, a commitment to rejoin Erasmus Plus, and greater cooperation on energy." Lorna Slater, co-leader of the Scottish Greens, said the case for developing closer ties to the EU grows stronger each day amid the threat imposed by the far right. She said, "Europe Day gives us a space to reflect on Scotland's past, present and future. Before Nigel Farage's Brexit Party and the Tories made the disastrous decision to take us out of the European Union, we were able to enjoy the opportunities and connections offered by freedom of movement. 5 years later, we are still picking up the pieces of a Brexit that people in Scotland overwhelmingly rejected. Limited movement between countries for work and leisure, skilled worker shortages that result in lots of hurdles to jump over for Europeans' rights to work in Scotland and vice versa." Slater added, "Scotland deserves better. As a self-governing country, we could reconnect with Europe to build strong ties again. With the creep of fascism around the world, serious climate breakdown and the UK's political landscape changing, the case for Scotland to reconnect with the EU grows stronger every day." That article was written by Gregor Young and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 9th of May 2025, from the news section. Scottish Arts College collapses suddenly with all jobs lost. Article written by Alistair Ferguson. A Scottish performing arts college has closed suddenly, leaving students in the dark over their future studies. The Scottish Institute of Theatre, Dance, Film and Television, based in Livingston, has closed its doors immediately after calling in liquidators, the Scotsman has reported. The institution has been training actors, dancers and musical theatre performers for 2 decades. Around 20 staff members have reportedly lost their jobs following the school's closure, with all students having also been affected. It has been reported that staff were told about the future of the school and have been told their wages would be paid late. Staff collected their personal belongings at the building on Thursday, according to reports. Founded in 2005, the Institute began life as a full-time school called the MGA Academy of Performing Arts and went on to offer a number of degrees, ranging from bachelor's to master's, in fields including theatre acting, film and television, dance and performance. The school's website now directs to the liquidator's statement, with a notice also posted on their social media channels. Kate McLachlan, insolvency practitioner from Middlebrooks Business Recovery and Advice in Edinburgh, has been appointed as interim liquidator. A statement read, "As a result, the company has ceased to trade with immediate effect. The priority at this time is supporting the employees and students who have been displaced as a result of the liquidation." It comes following a petition to wind up was presented to the Sheriff Court at Livingston on March 28, 2025, and granted on May 6th. One parent wrote on social media, "The Scottish Institute of Theatre, Dance and Film and Television has closed today after going into liquidation, leaving many students in the dark about their studies. Does anyone know who we should speak to? There has been no warnings or correspondence from them to advise the students on what they should do. Absolutely disgraceful way to treat young talented people who only want to learn and perform and make a career." Another parent said, "Clarity around current students needs to be provided ASAP. As a parent of a final year student handing in their dissertation, we need to know that they will all be getting their degrees." That article was written by Alistair Ferguson and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 9th of May 2025, from the Politics section. SNP U-turn on peak train fares must spark full transport revolution. Article written by Mark Ruskell. The announcement this week that peak rail fares will be scrapped for good this year will be welcomed by commuters all across Scotland. I am delighted that we will see an end to overpriced train fares once and for all. But this would never have happened without the Scottish Greens introducing a pilot project back in 2023. It was one we worked hard to secure and took a lot of negotiation. We were deeply disappointed when the Scottish Government chose to drop it a year later. At the time, we were told that it was necessary and that ending peak rail fares didn't increase the number of passengers far enough to sustain it as a long-term project. However, the data showed that around 10 million more journeys were taken during the trial, and that is a number that cannot be scoffed at. Following the decision, we worked with public transport campaigners, commuters and trade unions to make the case for this to be made permanent, and were delighted when the First Minister announced the U-turn this week. Our case was very simple. When public transport is affordable, accessible and available, people will use it. For too long, far too many people have had to pay far too much to get to work, school or to commute. More often than not, peak rail travellers have no say in the times they need to travel and have had to suck it up and cough up the money. There are a lot of people who would choose to get the train or the bus, but choose not to because it is cheaper to travel by car. The data is clear. If our buses and trains are cheaper, more people will choose them. This isn't only damaging for people's budgets, it is undermining our chances of reaching our climate goals and actively making our roads busier, dirtier and more dangerous. Going by car should never be the most cost-effective option. It's a particularly pertinent point when the Scottish Government is actively shelving its car reduction targets. But cheaper rail is only useful if there are trains for people to get in the first place. Despite progress, there are still a lot of areas across Scotland that would hugely benefit from new and improved rail infrastructure, bringing tourism and work opportunities for people and opening up our country. It doesn't have to cost a fortune to build. In the Mid-Scotland and Fife region that I represent, a campaign is underway to reopen Newborough railway station, to create reliable and sustainable travel options that allow locals who have felt cut off from the wider community to feel connected again. Local residents have put forward plans that would see short, low-cost platforms deployed, as opposed to new multi-million-pound stations being built. Public transport has to work for its passengers, not for exorbitant profiteering, and that is why we want to make all forms of public transport cheaper and more widely available. When we introduced free bus travel for under-22s, there were people who doubted it. But with hundreds of millions of free journeys putting money back in people's pockets, it is one of the proudest achievements of devolution. This simple change has resulted in lots of extra bus journeys up and down the country and created a new generation of bus users. It is crucial that we ensure that generation sticks to buses. That's why, in this year's budget negotiations, we secured a pilot scheme for a £2 bus fare cap that will begin in the months ahead. We believe it will be a success, and it will allow people to make journeys they are currently priced out of while supporting workers and regular commuters, as well as people visiting their friends and families. We hope that it will be rolled out quickly across Scotland, helping more people and more families to get around our beautiful country. This would have a huge benefit for people travelling between towns and cities where the cost is often too high. Just imagine if the money earmarked for unnecessary and polluting road build projects was instead used to invest in public transport infrastructure rather than on duelling every square inch of tarmac. It could help to transform our country for the better. It's not only commuters who benefit from better and cheaper public transport options, it's also our communities. By cutting the number of cars on our roads, we can make our streets greener and safer for children and families. People deserve to feel confident in our streets, whether they are walking, wheeling or cycling, and less cars on roads is key to increasing that safety. That article was written by Mark Ruskell and read to you by Elizabeth.
From the National, Monday the 12th of May 2025. From the Culture section, exclusive, Charting Protest Pop, How Music Can Bring About Change, article written by Professor Gregor Gall. The 1980s was a period of profound popularity for political pop. Now, 40 years later, it's what we desperately need again with a Labour, not Tory government applying an austerity agenda and Trump's state terrorism taking a terrible toll. This is because music can play a positive part in reviving and enlivening resistance. Decrying the effects of deindustrialisation and mass unemployment, Ghost Town by the Specials from Coventry spent 3 weeks at number 1 in the singles chart in June 1981, just months after the first widespread rioting in inner cities for many decades. The lead singer from the Specials, Terry Hall, then left with 2 other members of the band, Neville Staple and Linville Golding, to set up a new group called Funboy 3. Later that same year, Funboy 3 had a top 20 chart hit with The Lunatics Have Taken Over the Asylum, about Thatcher, the Tories and nuclear war. The Specials continued as Special AKA, led by its co-founder Jerry Dammers. In 1984, the band released a single Free Nelson Mandela, written by Dammers. The single entered the top 10, spending 2 weeks at number 9. It was, The Guardian commented 30 years later, one of the most effective protest songs in history. The Specials and their offspring are just some of the many examples of not just pop becoming patently political, but also being prolifically popular, judged by record sales, chart success and airplay. Such songs and others were played in daytime radio like Radio 1, and not just on its specialist late nights ghetto slots like those of John Peel. The Housemartins from Hull are another obvious example of popular political pop. Both the band's albums, London Nothing Hull 4, 1986, and The People Who Grinned Themselves to Death, 1987, made it into the top 10 of the album charts, and they had 2 top 10 singles and 4 top 20 singles. On the inner sleeve of the first album, the band declared, "For too long the ruling class have enjoyed an extended New Year's Eve party, whilst we can only watch, face pressed up against the glass. We say, don't try gatecrashing a party full of bankers. Burn the house down." Along the way, there was the Beat single Stand Down Margaret in 1980, Morrissey's Margaret on the Guillotine in 1988, Elvis Costello's Tramp the Dirt Down in 1989, all about wanting to see Thatcher terminated. The Clash, with its lyricist and lead singer, Joe Strummer, was still around, releasing a triple album in 1980 called Sandinista, in tribute to the successful Nicaraguan revolution, which contained tracks like Washington Bullets that condemned American and Russian imperialism. This was followed up by the likes of Know Your Rights, 1982, and This Is England, 1985, about human rights and deindustrialisation, respectively. Of course, the politics of all these political pop lyrics were wide-ranging and left-wing, ranging from radical through to revolutionary. But later the same year, as Free Nelson Mandela was in the charts, Mike Dewar, of Ultravox fame and from Cambuslang, and Bob Geldof, from Belfast Boomtown Rats, organised Band Aid, the one-off pop supergroup, which released Do They Know It's Christmas? It was a desperate attempt to raise money to end the horrendous scenes of mass starvation taking place in Ethiopia at the time. The single made the Christmas number 1 that year, staying there for 5 weeks, becoming the fastest selling single of all time in Britain, and then went on to sell some 3 million copies. Band Aid then led to Live Aid, 2 mass simultaneous hours-long concerts in London and Philadelphia, again to raise money to alleviate the starvation in Ethiopia. In the US, Band Aid and Do They Know It's Christmas inspired Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie to write and release the single We Are the World in 1985 with an American cast of supergroup singers and musicians. With sales in excess of 20 million, it became the 8th best-selling single of all time, again raising money for the victims of famine in Ethiopia. In 1985, Christine, lyricist and lead singer for the left-wing band The Redskins, more about them later, branded Live Aid, and by implication Band Aid as well, as Egos for Ethiopia. In 1986, anarchist band Chumbawamba released their album Pictures of Starving Children Sell Records. The Redskins and Chumbawamba argued such charity initiatives were thoroughly liberal and not left-wing, as it not only masked the true causes of the starvation, that is, not a lack of rain, but also were sticking plasters on a gaping open wound. Indeed, that Do They Know It's Christmas was deemed to be needed to be released twice again in the next 2 decades illustrated the point that the effort had not ended hunger and starvation in Africa, nor even looked at its actual underlying causes. Band Aid was, indeed, a Band-Aid, brand plaster. By contrast, and though he'd been part of Band Aid and Live Aid, Paul Weller, previously of The Jam and then the Style Council, put together a group of musicians in late 1984 to raise money for the striking miners so they would not be starved back to work. Called the Council Collective, they released the Soul Deep single, which reached number 24 in the singles chart. This was a more radical move than Band Aid because it meant tackling the Tories on the home turf. Weller had form here, Weller was calling for a general strike in Trans Global Express in the Jam's last album, the Gift album of 1982, and pronouncing on Walls Come Tumbling Down from the Style Council's 1985 album, Our Favourite Shop, that the class war is real and not mythologised. During the year-long miners' strike, many bands and artists such as Billy Bragg, the Housemartins, New Model Army, Newton Neurotics, The Men They Couldn't Hang, the Three Johns, as well as the Redskins and Easterhouse, played countless benefit gigs to raise money and spirits for the striking miners and their families. Bragg released Between the Wars about the miners' strike in 1985, reaching number 15 in the charts, followed by the likes of There Is Power in a Union from his 1986 album Talking with the Taxman about poetry. After the devastating defeat of the miners' strike in March 1985, Bragg and Weller took the initiative to form Red Wedge, a collective of mainly musicians in support of the Labour Party in the run-up to the 1987 general election. They organised gigs and meetings. Labour's loss to the Tories again was something of a death knell for popular political pop, with even Bragg mournfully opining on his song Waiting for the Great Leap Forwards from his 1988 Workers' Playtime album. Mixing pop and politics, he asked me what the use is. I offer him embarrassment and my usual excuses. The economic, political and social stimulants to the rise of radical music in the 1980s were not hard to find. High youth unemployment combined with the existing traditions of folk and punk music, plus a personalised hatred of Margaret Thatcher, were the wellsprings. Punk's DIY ethic also encouraged anyone to pick up a guitar and form a band. This expression through music was facilitated not just by music being the quintessential component of youth culture and youthful rebellion, but also by the emergence of independent, progressive rock record labels like Go Discs and Rough Trade. There were far less stringent rules for receiving housing and unemployment benefits, which allowed budding musicians to hone their craft without having to undertake paid work. Of course, an unfortunate but equally forceful, if not more forceful, movement in music was the escapism of the new romantics such as Duran Duran and Spandau Ballet. Surprisingly, the Scottish supply of political pop was slight, even though working class communities in the Central Belt were equally badly affected by Thatcherism and deindustrialisation. None of the big and medium-sized hitters like Altered Images, The Associates, Aztec Camera, Big Country, Bluebells, Blue Nile, Deacon Blue, Delamitri, Hipsway, Hue and Cry, The Jesus and Mary Chain, Lloyd Cole and the Commotions, Orange Juice, Primal Scream, Texas, and Wet 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 were known for anything approximating to political pop. This was even though Charlotte Spiteri of Texas said she was inspired by Joe Strummer of The Clash and wanted to do what he did. Where Scotland did contribute was through the Proclaimers with their single Letter from America in 1987 from This Is the Story album. It reached number 3 with its telling outro refraining about deindustrialisation. Bathgate no more, Linwood no more, Metho no more, Irvine no more. On their next album in 1988, Sunshine and Leith, there was a song Cap in Hand with its key line, I can't understand why we let someone else rule our land, cap in hand. The various songs like Belfast Child and Mandela Day from Simple Minds' 1989 album, called Street Fighting Years, seemed to lack authenticity given the band's previous songs. Though Dick Gaughan, a communist folk singer from Edinburgh, never troubled the charts, its anti-war song, Think Again of 1983, became well known in the peace movement. There was also an anarchist leaning, The Exploited from Edinburgh, whose first 2 albums, Punk's Not Dead and Troops of Tomorrow, went top 20. Scotland's only other connection was through UB40 from Birmingham. Taking its name from the unemployment benefit, Form 40, needed for signing on for the dole, the band was fronted by 3 Campbell brothers. Their hits included Food for Thought, 1980, about starvation, which reached number 4, and 1 in 10, 1981, about unemployment, which reached number 7. The Scottish connection is that the Campbell brothers' father was a communist folk singer called Ian Campbell. He helped with the initial lyrical direction of the band. There was, however, no Scottish connection to Easterhouse. The band from Manchester, led by 2 brothers associated with the Revolutionary Communist Party, took their name from the Glasgow housing scheme as an act of solidarity with the community there. Even though most of the aforementioned bands also wrote love songs, almost all of their political songs only dealt with what was wrong and not how to resolve the situation. The exception was the Redskins. Led by a member of the Trotskyist Socialist Workers' Party, their lyrics made clear that they believed unequivocally there was one solution, namely revolution. Their single, Bring It Down, This Insane Thing, reached number 33 in 1985, and the next year, their album, Neither Washington Nor Moscow, reached number 31. Turning to the day, is this 40-year-old past all but a foreign country now? There are some songs that still have resonance today. One, for example, is There Is Heartland from 1986 with its lines, Let the poor drink the milk while the rich eat the honey, let the bums count their blessings while they count their money, and its outro of, As the pound in our pocket turns into $1, this is the 51st state of the USA. But what about new and up-and-coming bands? While there are still some long-standing political bands around making new music, like Manic Street Preachers from Wales, there is a deadly dearth of the new. Bob Vylan, The Idols, Kneecap and Sleaford Mods are 4 of the relatively more well-known ones, although they are not exactly new. The likes of Joe Solo and Grace Petrie have kept the folk-based tradition of protest songs alive. Of course, existing bands have the potential to produce political music. Billy Bragg puts the dearth of the new down to younger people expressing themselves through other means now, like social media. But this is only half the story at best, and as the reduction in the cost of technology means that it is much cheaper to make and distribute music now, even if it is difficult to make a living from it. There was no great revival of left-wing music under Blair and Brown from 1997 to 2010 because, until the tail end of those Labour governments, there was economic growth, increased public spending and some hope. Now, with a Starmer-led Labour government, we find ourselves in an altogether different situation. So, with Labour's loveless landslide turning into despair and destitution for many, the tyranny of Trump as well as the endless war in Gaza and Ukraine, there's definitely an audience for music that not just attacks what's wrong, but also points to the alternatives. Capitalist companies call that a gap in the market. We have to hope that we'll soon see an array of new Billy Braggs, Joe Strummers and Paul Wellers for the late 2020s, fired up by the dashed expectations of a Labour government and the mounting anger it is causing. Music cannot change the world in and of itself, but it can certainly help change people's consciousness, giving expression to beliefs that provide hope and inspiration. Music that expresses this can reflect a popular mood for radical, left-wing change, as well as spurring on those that are organising for that very change. As written by Professor Gregor Gall, read by Ian McKenna.
From the National, Monday the 12th of May, from the news section. Scottish charity handed £50,000 from LEZ fines to help vital work. Article by Hamza Ahmed. A Scottish charity has been awarded tens of thousands from a collection of fines accumulated from high-polluting vehicles entering the city centre. Plugged In, a charity which works on upcycling technology, has received £50,000 from the Low Emission Zone Community Support Fund to renovate old phones, laptops and tablets for people in Glasgow. Income from the LEZ penalty charges, following scheme operating costs, is granted to projects including children's play areas, improvements to green spaces and food growing spaces, renewable projects such as solar panels, and schemes for air quality, rewilding and the establishment of wildflower areas. Managed by the North West Glasgow Voluntary Sector Network, Plugged In was established during the pandemic. The goal is to provide support to members of community who have no or limited access to technology. Councillor Agnes Miller, City Councillor for Climate, said reinvesting LEZ penalties will play a key role in helping projects like Plugged In benefit the community. The £50,000 grant will enable Plugged In to continue its vital work, which breathes new life into discarded technology, he says. By rescuing devices from landfill, this inspiring recycling initiative empowers members of the local community and promotes digital inclusion. Councillor Miller emphasised the magnitude of the community benefit already achieved through the fund. So far, 18 organisations have secured vital funding, totalling £620,409 from the Low Emission Zone Community Support Fund. And we expect to reopen the scheme for new applications later this year, he added. Martina Johnston-Gray, Network Manager at the North West Glasgow Voluntary Sector Network, said she was pleased with the support it allows them to not only bolster their workforce, but expand their work to other parts within the city. I'm delighted to receive the funding, as it allows us to employ someone full-time and roll out the project in another area of Glasgow, she said. Our aim is to equip Glasgow citizens with a device that will help them learn, find employment, contact family and friends, and take more control of their lives. And that article was written by Hamza Ahmed, and led by me, Aaron. From the National, Monday the 12th of May, from the news section. Family-run Scottish cinema bought by UK chain after 3 decades. Article by Alex Chisholm. It is the end of an era for family-run cinema in Galashiels. The Pavilion Cinema has been sold to UK-wide chain Merlin Cinemas. The move concludes 31 years of management by the Poole family, who decided that the time was right to pass the baton on. Andrew Poole, the cinema manager, said, "After 31 years of running the Pavilion Cinema, we now feel the time is right to pass the baton on. During our tenure at the Pavilion, my family and I have enjoyed tremendous support from over 3 million amazingly loyal customers, and we can't thank them enough for their custom, through the good times and through the bad times." He added that the cinema was being left in very safe hands, joining Merlin's portfolio, which includes 2 other Scottish sites in Ayr and Thurso. Poole highlighted their family's investment of more than £7,500,000 over the past 30 years. This includes converting to digital cinema in 2011, replacing all seats in 2016, and upgrading the sound system in 2020. Poole said, "We've survived the COVID crisis, the cost of living crisis, and a couple of writers' strikes and the recent actors' strikes, and the cinema is still here." The sale ensures the Pavilion's future for many years to come, with all employees set to continue their roles under the new ownership. Poole said, "The greatest asset this business has is its staff. I am delighted to say that all our employees will be transferred to Merlin, with the employment continuing with them when the handover completes in mid-June." Jeff Greaves, Managing Director at Merlin Cinemas, said, "We look forward to continuing this fantastic work done by the Poole family in offering a wide selection of current films and providing a warm welcome to all of the cinema's customers. The cinema will remain open during the period of Merlin taking over, and we look forward to a smooth transition." And that article was written by Alex Chisholm and read by me, Aaron.
From the National, Tuesday the 13th of May 2025, from the news section. Scottish unemployment rate grows, but still below UK average. Article written by James Walker. The unemployment rate in Scotland rose in the last quarter, according to the latest official figures. Data from the Office for National Statistics, ONS, shows the unemployment rate for people aged 16 and over was 4.3% in the 3 months from January 2025 to March 2025. This is an increase of 0.5% on the previous quarter, but below the UK average of 4.5%. It is also a decrease of 0.2% compared with the same quarter in 2024. The figures show that in total, 119,000 people aged 16 and over were out of work in Scotland in the last quarter. Meanwhile, the proportion of people aged 16 and over in employment rose to 74.5%, an increase of 0.4% on the previous quarter. The figures show there were 2,662,000 people in employment between January and March. Scottish Government analysis of HMRC early estimates show there were 2.45 million payrolled employees in Scotland in April 2025, a decrease of 12,000 on the year before, and a decrease of 3,000 on March. The analysis also shows median monthly pay for payrolled employees stood at £2,533 in April, an increase of 5.8% on the year before. Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes said, "These figures show Scotland's labour market remains resilient despite challenging economic times. It's encouraging to see the number of payrolled employees in Scotland remains high, and their median monthly pay is close to the highest on record and higher than the UK overall. With global challenges impacting the economy, our programme for government outlines measures to create jobs and drive growth. This includes launching both Invest Scotland to showcase inward investment opportunities and the First Minister's Start-up Challenge to support innovative businesses to start and grow." And that article was written by James Walker. From the National, Tuesday the 13th of May 2025, from the news section. 3 Belgian soldiers hurt in shooting incident near Scottish town. Article written by James Walker. 3 Belgian soldiers have been injured in a shooting incident during a training exercise in Scotland, Belgium's Defence Ministry has said. The ministry confirmed that 2 of the soldiers are in a stable condition, with one expected to undergo surgery in Scotland before returning to Belgium. The third was taken to hospital with minor injuries and has been discharged. About a dozen soldiers also suffered hearing damage as a result of the incident. We previously reported on how a convoy of Belgian Army vehicles was spotted near the town of Moray. A spokesperson for the Defence Ministry said, "On May 12th, during Exercise Red Condor currently taking place in Scotland, 3 Belgian soldiers were injured. They received first aid on site and were then transferred to a regional hospital. In addition, around a dozen soldiers suffered hearing damage." Defence authorities have confirmed that the 2 soldiers who were seriously injured are now in stable condition. They have already been able to speak with their families. One of them will undergo surgery in Scotland before being returned to Belgium. The third soldier sustained minor injuries and has since returned to the military camp. The spokesperson added, "The families of the injured personnel have been informed. The incident took place during a planned training exercise. An investigation has been launched to determine the exact circumstances. Last week it was reported that around 600 Belgian military personnel were in Moray for Exercise Red Condor. In a post on X, Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever offered his condolences to the injured soldiers and their families. I have received the sad news that 3 soldiers from the 3rd Parachute Battalion were injured during an exercise in Scotland, he wrote. I wish the injured a speedy recovery. My thoughts are with their loved ones. And that article was written by James Walker.
This is from The National on Tuesday the 13th of May 2025 from the comments section. A squalid speech from a Prime Minister without principles. This article is by Shona Craven. A squalid chapter for our politics, our economy and our country. A casual listener to Keir Starmer's speech yesterday morning might have thought he'd had a light bulb moment over the weekend. Perhaps he had reassessed his party's priorities and decided to stop dancing to the Reform UK tune. Alas, no. The chapter to which he was referring was 2019 to 23, when, under the Conservative government that had steered through Brexit, net migration quadrupled. Take back control? Hardly, says Starmer. The people who deployed that slogan did nothing of the sort. It's almost as though Brexit was a terrible idea, completely missold to voters. But Starmer can't come out and say that. What with his big European Union reset just around the corner, and those same voters once again hanging on every word spoken by Nigel bloody Farage. Starmer also has to pretend his latest package of measures to bring down migration is not a knee-jerk response to the substance-free rabble-rousing of Reform UK. Apparently, only complete nerds would think that. People who like politics will try to make this all about politics, about this or that strategy, targeting these voters, responding to that party, he said. No, I am doing this because it is right, because it is fair, and because it is what I believe in. What he believes in, it would seem, is stripping the UK of much-needed care workers just so that he can point to a decline in net migration figures at some unspecified future date. The Immigration White Paper points to concern about exploitation of foreign workers using the Adult Social Care visa and suggests this can only be avoided by scrapping it altogether. The government points to historic levels of poor pay and poor terms and conditions leading to low domestic recruitment. But there are few clues as to how the sector can be radically transformed as a matter of urgency. The government is committed to establishing fair pay agreements which will empower worker, employer and other sector representatives to negotiate improvements in the terms of employment. I'm sure the 79% of care homes in Scotland with job vacancies will be bracing themselves for a deluge of applications after discerning job seekers read that. Part of the rationale appears to be research from the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, that found low-paid migrant workers who come to the UK and stay here for life end up costing the state money. According to The Times, Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff Morgan McSweeney is among those who have been urging him to weigh up the long-term costs of legal migration when formulating Labour's policies. While the OBR began publishing estimates of these costs last year, it does not currently include them in its official forecasts because these only consider Treasury spending plans for the next 5 years. Making policy based on this data might seem a sensible strategy if the care sector was recruiting low-paid staff from overseas for a lark or to give their care homes more of a multicultural flavour. However, we all know that foreign workers are desperately needed to look after the elderly and vulnerable in a UK with a rapidly ageing population. The Tories, for all their faults, understood this which is why they exempted those coming to the country via the health and social care visa route from the new minimum earnings threshold they introduced in December 2023. But at the same time, they banned overseas care workers from bringing dependents with them in an attempt to fill posts without simultaneously filling up school places and bedrooms in scarce housing. There's hardly been time for the impact of those changes to be measured, but Labour are impatient and looking for quick fixes that will get them the headline figure they believe they need to fend off Farage. They won't state what figure they have in mind, though, as Starmer has watched previous PMs set targets and fail to meet them. And going down the failed route is not a sensible way for me. Haha. It's a brilliant strategy, really. Don't specify what exactly you are trying to do with your grim warnings about the UK becoming an island of strangers, and then no one can accuse you of failing if you don't manage to achieve it. Make no mistake, this plan means migration will fall. That's a promise, says Starmer. Oh, but also, if it doesn't, they'll try something else. Mark my words, we will. So, we'd be making a mistake to think this won't work, but we should mark his words in the event the promise is broken and it doesn't. Is that clear? Asked what his message was for the economically inactive people in the UK who might not wish to work in a care home, Starmer's reply was essentially tough shit. If he thinks Reform UK sympathisers will thank him for leaving their elderly relatives without care, or with carers who would rather be doing anything else, he may be in for a nasty surprise. And that article was written by Shona Craven and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday the 13th of May 2025 from the comments section. My friends of 15 years in Gaza have barely any food left. This article is by Alison Phipps. My colleagues and friends of 15 years in Gaza have barely any food left. Aid organisations have empty warehouses. Children are now dying at a rate, medics tell me reliably, of around 100 a day of malnutrition and deliberate starvation by Israeli orders. The rhetoric coming from some Israeli TV channels and from the Knesset is spine-chilling. Recently, UK lawyers for Israel put out a report claiming that the ceasing of food and water supplies to Gaza was a health benefit aiming to reduce the rates of obesity. I read the reports and felt the waves of nausea as my body repelled the doublespeak denialism. If we do not get food and water into Gaza in the next days, then the consequences will be utterly catastrophic. A ceasefire is long overdue, one that is permanent, one that holds, one that brings the kinds of accountability and justice which will build a lasting peace. A huge range of experts, legal scholars, social, scientific and humanities scholars, and also a vast movement of ordinary people all agree that what is unfolding in Gaza, perpetrated by the leaders of the State of Israel and abetted by their allies, presents a clear intention to annihilate conditions for life of the Palestinian people in Gaza. In the 10 Stages of Genocide, published by Genocide Watch, Stage 9 describes the extermination phase of an active genocide. During active genocide, only rapid and overwhelming armed intervention can stop genocide. Real safe areas or refugee escape corridors should be established with heavily armed international protection. An unsafe safe area is worse than none at all. The international responsibility to protect transcends the narrow interests of individual nation-states. If strong nations will not provide troops to intervene directly, they should provide the airlift, equipment, and financial means necessary for regional states to intervene. The UN General Assembly may authorise action under the Uniting for Peace Resolution GA-Res 330, which has been used 13 times for such armed intervention. If the UN is paralysed, regional alliances must act under Chapter 8 of the UN Charter. It is long past time for intervention by the United Nations, weakened as the organisation is by major divestment from key donor states like the US, its key instruments, like the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, subject to unspeakable political pressure and interference. Stage 10 of a genocide, which in my opinion we reached a long while ago, is denial. Denial is the final stage that lasts throughout and always follows genocide. It is among the surest indicators of further genocidal massacres. The perpetrators of genocide dig up the mass graves, burn the bodies, try to cover up the evidence and intimidate the witnesses. They deny that they committed any crimes and often blame what happened on the victims. Acts of genocide are disguised as counterinsurgency if there is an ongoing armed conflict or civil war. Perpetrators block investigations of the crimes and continue to govern until driven from power by force when they flee into exile. There they remain with impunity like Pol Pot or Idi Amin, unless they are captured and a tribunal is established to try them. You can make your own mind up about what is being live streamed into the palm of your hand on your mobile phone. In early 2024, in her report entitled The Anatomy of Genocide, Francesca Albanese, the UN's Special Rapporteur for the Occupied Palestinian Territories, identified a further stage in genocide, that of humanitarian camouflage. This is the pretense that what is being done is humanitarian, when it is a live act of ongoing harm. Already the alarm has been raised in the ICJ orders issued to UN member states since January 2024. These orders were roundly ignored by too many states and by Israel. With other experts and humanitarian providers shut out of Gaza by Israel, I fear the end of supplies of food, water and medicine means we are entering an end phase of mass killing by starvation, which, though too horrific to contemplate, must compel people of goodwill to action and states to intervene. Our own British state is refusing to intervene, though judging by my email inbox, many people are now desperately exercised by the question, what can we do? So, what can you do? You can always do something. Nothing is too small or insignificant. Boycott, divest, sanction. It takes work, but every product left on a shelf raises the pressure on a company. Consumer boycotts work, and often quickly. Already firms which have invested in the illegal settlements in occupied Palestine are reporting falling profits. And when you do this, you also act in solidarity with other areas of the world suffering too. Divest personally from firms supplying the arms trade, or don't buy products from companies that do. There are apps which can help you. Follow Campaign Against the Arms Trade for more information. Write again to your MP. Mine is now responding rapidly to my requests, not just sending a "I note your concern" generic response. We still live in a representative democracy. Make them represent your views through weight of numbers and letters. Ask for all possible means, including humanitarian protection forces and UN resolutions, to be used to prevent the mass starvation of Palestinians in Gaza. Keep reading up on the condition of Palestine, the histories suppressed or untaught. Curate your own news feeds. The mainstream media have been shockingly compliant. The National, one of the only national papers to cover Gaza consistently. Take responsibility for checking sources, and if you honestly feel as though you didn't know what was happening, change to reliable news sources and support them. Join in protests, vigils, marches. Support the many, many events. Give money if you can afford to. Keep on doing your own little bit because it has built already into a movement for justice and peace. And work for peace, real peace, not just a wishy-washy, liberal, only the middle classes benefit kind of peace. Do this at grassroots level in your own communities to support those suffering everywhere. Our own UNESCO Chair Network is holding our spring school this week, learning from one another about grassroots peace, learning from refugees about what it takes to make peace be sustainable, restorative, transformative. May peace prevail is our spring school motto this year, menaced as we are by hope. It's on the peace poles from Allenton Peace Sanctuary in Dumfries. The loveliest of artists, scholars and new Scots are arriving to work together through grief and in solidarity, in the worst of times, for a peace that prevails. Because despite it all, we must start the work now to stop the next war, the next genocide, the next mass killing of children. May peace prevail. And that article was written by Alison Phipps and read by Lynn McNeil. Alison Phipps is a UNESCO Chair for Refugee Integration through Education, Languages and Arts at the University of Glasgow.
The National Politics on Wednesday the 14th of May. Assisted Dying Bill clears its first hurdle. A front page article written by Jane MacLeod. The MSP hoping to change the law to allow assisted dying for terminally ill Scots hailed a landmark moment after MSPs backed the general principles of his proposals. Holyrood voted by 70 votes to 56 in favour of the Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Adults Scotland Bill, introduced by Lib Dem MSP Liam MacArthur, with one abstention. The vote came after almost 5 hours of debate on the controversial subject at Holyrood. Afterwards, Mr MacArthur said, "This is a landmark moment for Scotland." A number of high-profile MSPs, including First Minister John Swinney, Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes and former First Ministers Nicola Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf, had all voted against the bill, along with Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar. Afterwards, Mr MacArthur accepted that deciding how to vote had been difficult for many, but added, "I believe that the quality of the debate today has shown our Parliament at its finest." He continued, "This bill has been a long time coming, but at long last it can offer that compassionate choice for the small number of terminally ill Scots who need it." Similarly, Ali Thompson, Director of Dignity in Dying Scotland, hailed the Stage 1 vote as a watershed moment for compassion. She added, "MSPs have taken a historic step towards greater choice and protection for dying people. The Scottish Parliament has listened to dying people and is reflecting their views. Many will be feeling overwhelming relief and gratitude that today our country has moved towards a safer and more compassionate law." Holyrood had previously rejected 2 attempts to legalise assisted dying at the first vote in 2010 and in 2015. However, with the Parliament having backed the general principles of the bill, it will now go forward for further scrutiny and amendments. It will only become law if MSPs approve it in a final vote, which could take place later this year. As it stands, the bill would only allow people who have lived in Scotland for at least 12 months and who are registered with a GP in Scotland to request an assisted death. 2 doctors would both have to certify that someone is both terminally ill and has the mental capacity to make such a request for this to proceed. There would also be a time period of at least 2 weeks between a request being made and the necessary medication being provided, with the patient having to be able to take this themselves. And while it had originally been planned that people could apply for an assisted death from the age of 16, Mr MacArthur confirmed recently if the bill passed yesterday's vote, he would seek to amend this to 18. The decision came after the Lib Dem MSP had told Holyrood in an emotional speech that Scotland is ready for assisted dying. He said, "Today we can take a significant step forward, giving terminally ill adults across Scotland more choice. It's a brave step, yes, but it's a compassionate one, and it's a step I believe Scotland is ready to take." In another emotional contribution, SNP backbencher Elena Whittam told MSPs how her mother had opted to starve herself to death after being diagnosed with stage 4 terminal lung cancer. Ms Whittam told how her mother, Irene MacLeod, took 2 weeks to die after making that decision in secret back in 2014. Ms Whittam recalled, "I haven't even processed the fact that she was ill by the time we were ordering her wicker casket. She was only 58, she had so much to live for. And yet her last decision on this earth was to starve herself to hasten her inevitable death." The SNP MSP for Carrick, Gumnock and Doon Valley added, "My mum deserved to plan a compassionate death, surrounded by her family, not one she had to conduct in secret, with us only finding out when a caring nurse explained what she'd been enduring prior to lapsing into unconsciousness. No one should be forced to starve themselves, travel overseas or use other traumatic methods to end their lives when dealing with a terminal diagnosis." And she said that without change, people will continue to make choices, like my mum. A front-page article written by Jane MacLeod. The National News on Wednesday the 14th of May. Co-op to restock its empty shelves as it recovers from a major hack. An article written by Laura Pollock. The Co-op has said availability in its shops and website will start to recover from this weekend as it brings its systems back online following a major cyber attack. The Manchester-based group said it's working closely with suppliers to restock its stores after the hack caused significant disruption across its retail chain and led to bare shelves in many of its shops. It said it's getting its online systems back on track in a safe and controlled manner after being forced to shut down some of its systems to contain the attack. The group said that there will be improved availability in its food shops and online from this weekend, with its stock ordering system now fully online again. The Mutual added it's also now able to accept all forms of payment, including contactless and chip and PIN. A spokesperson for the Co-op said, "Following the malicious third-party cyber attack, we took early and decisive action to restrict access to our systems in order to protect our Co-op. We're now in the recovery phase and are taking steps to bring our systems gradually back online in a safe and controlled manner." The Mutual is amongst a number of retailers, including Marks & Spencer and Harrods, to have been hit by hacks in recent weeks. Marks & Spencer's, which has been grappling with the fallout from a highly damaging cyber attack since the Easter weekend, revealed on Tuesday that personal customer data had also been stolen by the hackers. Marks & Spencer's has not been able to take any orders through its website or its app since the 25th of April as it tries to resolve the problem, although all its stores remain open. The National Crime Agency has said it's investigating the attacks individually, but is mindful that they may be linked. The Co-op's stock availability has been hit particularly hard by the attack on its systems, and shoppers faced empty shelves because of the continued fallout. The group was reportedly prioritising supplies of essential items in some badly affected stores. It had also revealed that hackers stole members' personal data, such as names and contact details. The group was unable to take card payments in some shops, with contactless also affected, although the majority of the retailer's 2,300 shops have been able to take usual forms of payment. Cooperative Group Chief Executive Shireen Cowrie-Hack last week apologised to customers for the disruption, saying that it was a highly sophisticated attack. The firm, which also runs businesses spanning funeral services and insurance, is holding its annual general meeting for members in Manchester on Saturday. An article written by Laura Pollock.
This is from The National on Thursday 15th May 2025. From the comment section. Scotland needs real action on land reform. By Leslie Riddoch. Maybe I'm getting old. Maybe I've been round these houses too many times before. Maybe I am a misery magnet who attracts nothing but tales of unfair, crazy feudal difficulties when I visit pals across rural Scotland. Maybe my shonky memory is to blame. I may not recall who I spoke to last week, but I can remember every single piece of land reform promised yet not quite delivered over the last 25 years. Maybe I have unrealistic ideas of what can be changed in quarter of a century, prompted by seismic shifts on Egg, Assynt, Neudart, Gea and the rest, who made a watertight case for breaking up large landed estates in favour of capable local people. I thought we were done with piecemeal solutions. I thought all could see how absurd it is to think communities can be expected to outbid green lairds, wind farm developers and the wealthy jet set. Maybe a Caithness family, surrounded with memories of clearance, has made me more angry than most about Scotland's crazy land ownership system. Maybe too many trips to rational Nordic countries have turned my head, filling it with countless proven ways land could be more equitably owned and purposefully used. Maybe I'm a dreamer, maybe I'm mad, and though I clearly don't think so, that is a possibility. Because when I read that the Scottish Land Commission needs the public to tell it what a fully reformed land system might look like, I despair. Available, affordable land whose diversity of ownership is protected by the same laws and taxes that have been commonplace across Northern Europe for centuries. Isn't that what every party but the Tories signed up to? If so, what's this all about? Maybe some will admire this worthy attempt to re-energise the land reform debate and applaud slightly before turning the page. And there's the rub. If this call for participation fails to get participants, it will endorse the prevailing political view that land reform is too difficult, not urgent enough, and not top of anyone's priority list. That isn't true. We are all just weary. A government that's been in power for 17 years doesn't need the public to tell them, just get on with the job. In case anyone's looked away for the last 10 years of this column, here's a wee list of things to be getting on with. A land tax, passed by the SNP conference last year, but clearly too hot to trot. A brake on second home ownership, but not by double or even treble council tax rates because they don't deter the millionaires buying up scenic Scotland. The Welsh require a change of use if a home is not designated as a main residence. Why not that? The Norwegians designate a home permanently first or second and no buyer can change the category. So a designated first home can only ever be bought as a main residence by someone already on the local electoral register. That has worked for 70 years. Why not here? A compulsory sale order, or CSO, promised since 2016, would let councils force the sale of derelict land or buildings to a third party instead of compulsory purchase orders bringing unwelcome bits of property onto their books. The CSO is a good way round dereliction. Just do it. A Succession Act has promised decades back to rectify the unbelievable situation where children in Scotland do not have equal rights to inherit land, almost uniquely in the developed world. Yes, we have the right to equally inherit property from a parent, but not land. which allows large farms and estates to pass quite legally to just one offspring. That leaves other siblings, usually daughters, with next to nothing, and chunks of Scotland subject to the whims of just one person, usually a very wealthy man. Across Europe, the Neopolynic Code established the right to inherit equally land in 1801. Over time, equal inheritance of land splits up estates organically and pulls down land prices as more becomes available. That also helps affordable housing, repopulation, and keeping young folk on the land. It is unbelievable this has not yet happened here. So once again, just get on with it. Amend the Crofton Community Right to Buy 2003 with a time limit on sale negotiations so the thwarted islanders of Great Bernera, Lewis, can become the first people to actually use this currently pointless bit of legislation. Review the success of our current national parks before creating another in Galloway. Large parts of the Cairngorms are basically a blasted heath, containing ravaged land that's endlessly burnt as a driven grouse moor. And the national parks can do next to nothing about it, or the relentless spread of second homes and short-term lets in the park. Maybe disbanding the parks and creating truly powerful local councillors would do better and save money. Meanwhile, great that snares have been banned and grouse shooting licensed, but how about a total ban on muir burn? The last chair of the Scottish Land Commission, Andrew Thynne, wanted monopoly land ownership to be tackled in the next land reform bill. What happened to that? How about Westminster closing the loophole where woodland is bought as a tax dodge for inheritance tax, forcing up prices beyond local reach? How about Holyrood tackling the large sporting estates that pay no business rates because they're set up as trusts that qualify for small business exemptions and rebates? Some of these guys own squillions. How about a land ombudsman or commissioner as a single point of contact for the myriad individuals, communities and small businesses tearing their collective hair out over obstructionism? How about channeling money for new affordable housing through canny groups like Inverness-based Communities Housing Trust, prepared to build in small rural areas, not volume house builders? While we're at it, redraft or repeal National Planning Framework 4, a disastrous bit of planning guidance that fixes urban templates, like the 20-minute neighbourhood, upon rural Scotland. The result is development only in existing large towns, because it's easier. Developments around Fife are being turned down, even farm shops, because they cannot be easily accessed by public transport. There is no public transport in much of rural Scotland. Are locals building businesses in the countryside to be doubly penalised? Now, Michael Russell isn't daft, so maybe his call for evidence is a cunning plan to get public endorsement for more radical landform proposals in time for party manifestos in the forthcoming Scottish elections. Maybe. But surely it says something that the Scottish Land Commission wants the public to get weaving while yet another underwhelming land reform bill is going through Parliament. It's like a weird and self-harming form of Scottish exceptionalism. A rule, law, or land tax might work anywhere else in the world, but applied to Scotland, it will fail. Or things will get fiendishly complicated, or the delicate mix of interests will be disturbed, or the landowners' hackles will rise and government targets for reforestation Onshore wind and biodiversity will be jeopardised. So, sure, let's reimagine Scotland's land. What might it look like if Holyrood politicians were as bold as Scotland's community activists and delivered the modern equivalent of the Crofting Acts, or the high taxation that prompted 1/5 of Scottish land to be sold in the 1920s, or Tom Johnson's hydroelectric revolution of the 1940s? The Labour wartime Scottish Secretary said, so long as 6 families own 1/2 of Scotland, so long will countless families own none of it. That was 80 years ago. So, Scottish Land Commission, be bold. You've done loads of great research. Turn those ideas into your own manifesto and shock the political establishment awake. That article was by Leslie Riddoch.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and to tell your friends about our service.